Hello, hello. We are live again, or at least I think we are. I usually wait a couple of minutes to make absolutely sure that we're live before I start talking about anything, but I am going to be live in a minute or so with Nicki Kinton. We're going to be talking about credit management. We're going to be talking about how to make sure that your business gets paid. And we're going to be talking about what you need to do far in advance of ever sending an invoice to make sure that that happens. I've just got a little notification here to tell me that I'm live on LinkedIn, or to tell me that Stefan Thomas is live on LinkedIn. So there we go. Now that I know that that's there, I just need to do a couple of little things in the background before I bring Nicki on to make sure that that absolutely works. And I was going to say without further ado, but that would be amongst the cheesy things that I say, that would be about the cheesiest. So I am going to introduce you all to Nicki Kinton. Good afternoon, Nicki. It's lovely to be talking to you.
Thanks, Stefan. It's lovely to be talking to you too.
I I've known you for years, and at very first when I knew you, I thought it would all be about chasing debts, and that's almost the polar opposite of what it is that you do. So, for the benefit of the people who are watching or listening this afternoon, just give them a little hint as to what it is that you do.
Yeah, thanks. So it is very easy to think, and so many people do say, "Oh, does that mean you're a debt collector then?" And I get that an awful lot. But actually, what I do is all about prevention. So it's all about the things that you can put in place, the tools that you can use, and processes to actually prevent the need for debt collection in the first place. So prevention is always better than cure. And I'm a big believer in the fact that late payments are not the problem. Late payments are a symptom that something is missing, something hasn't been done earlier on in the process. And a lot of it starts before you've even made the sale.
Good afternoon, Roland Millwood, who I think is relatively local to you, if memory serves me correctly. So we know we've got people watching. So that's the bit that's interested me. What sort of things can people start to do in their businesses before they even make the sale to make sure that they're going to be paid? I know you've written a lot about this on LinkedIn, but where should people's thinking about it start, Nicki?
So it starts with the questions: is this the right client for me? So we talk about our ideal client profiles or avatars, whatever you want to call them, but we don't ever think in terms of the financial side of things like that. So we're very interested to know what their buying habits are, whether, for some businesses, whether they're driving a BMW or a Skoda, or whether they're, interested in foreign holidays, or whether they play golf. All those sort of things we build into our avatar. But one of the things that we don't think about from a business perspective is whether they are willing and able to pay. So the first place I would always start is looking at some form of due diligence. Now, whether that is paid for due diligence by using a credit reference agency or something like that, or whether that is asking your network, because actually somebody else in your network is bound to have done business with these people somewhere, and ask them what their experience was like. What were they like to work with? What were they like in paying? So all of those things will help you to build an idea of whether this is the type of client you want to work with, and that is likely to be a smooth relationship.
It's one of the it's genuinely one of the things that I love about networking, that you've got this. If people are having breakfast with each other, or meeting with each other on Zoom regularly, you build up this trust, and part of that trust is that people know what other people are like to deal with. As we're trying to create this network of people that we really want to do business with, that bit should be so important. I guess I wonder why people don't make it as important as it needs to be at the beginning. Do you think it's because they're really keen to do a sale with anyone they possibly can, or is there something else which stands in the way of people actually making sure that they are going to be paid?
So I think there is definitely an element of wanting to make the sale. When we first start out, or if the business goes through that sort of feast and famine type phases and you don't know where the next sale is coming from, then it's very tempting to just accept any sale that you can possibly make. And whilst that might look good on paper, it doesn't always look good in the bank account. And so there's a bit of a fear of saying no to somebody. We're a bit frightened of saying no because we don't know where the next sale is going to come from. And then the other side of that is some of the information obviously is paid for. If you're going to use something like a credit reference agency, it's paid for. And there is an element of resistance about paying for information and having to put that outlay without, when there's a possibility then that you're going to say no to the sale. So I would always suggest that actually, for the sake of what will be £20-25 to get a credit report, if you're going to be potentially making a sale of several hundred or several £1,000s, and there's a possibility that won't get paid, I think £25 is a small price to pay for that peace of mind. In addition to that, though, you don't have to say no. It's about finding ways to say yes. So even if they look like a high risk, that just changes your strategy with that client. That changes it from saying, well, I'm going to let you pay when we're done, to saying, actually, I need some of that money up front.
I think that's for the benefit of the people who are viewing or watching. If you've only just started viewing, watching, listening, however you're doing it, I'm talking to Nicki Kinton of Confident Cashflow. If you've got any questions for Nicki about credit management, if you've got any questions for Nicki about any of the processes that go behind it, or about anything that we're talking about, then pop them in the comments below. I will bring your question up on screen and we will get it answered. And actually, if you don't already know Nicki, and you probably should, I'm going to bring this up a few times on the screen during the course of this afternoon, but there is Nicki's LinkedIn profile. I will tag Nicki at the end of this, actually. It's haven't managed to do it as we've started, but you'll find Nicki. There's her LinkedIn profile up there, and go and connect with her. And I'm sure that Nicki puts a ton of content out there. I think one of the things that you've just mentioned, I really wish I'd known back at the very beginning, when I was running a magazine. That was my first attempt at running a business, and was really keen to get advertisers on board. So thought I'd sold the adverts. A horrible number of people actually never ever paid for the adverts afterwards, and let me down, because I didn't go to any of that any of that trouble, for want of a better word. I just thought it was great to get the sale in. I think with my speaking world, as you probably know, unless it's a very regular client, I get paid up front. But something that I've noticed a lot of times when people have asked me to be paid after the event, it's because they want to sell tickets for the event, which means that if they're not paying me until after the event, I'm taking quite a lot of the risk, because I'm scratching that date out in my diary to be at their event, which may never go ahead, but they want the option of me keeping it in my diary and possibly it never going ahead, or them not selling enough tickets. And it took me far too long to work out that what they were effectively doing was shifting that risk onto me. And I guess other businesses also don't quite think about it like that.
No, that's right. Interestingly, so obviously too many interests, but interest rates are starting to go up, and they will continue to rise. And actually, one of the ways that businesses will push the risk onto you is, instead of going and borrowing at the bank where the risk is on them of default, they will, start paying you later and later and later, because you're a cheaper source of money, essentially. So you start acting as their bank. So there's different ways that businesses can pass the risk on to you. And at the end of the day, it's essentially your money sitting in their bank account funding their business.
I've never looked at it like that, because we've come from a period of historically low interest rates. I suppose people have been sort of lulled into a false sense of security. That sounds like I'm trying to make a terrible pun, which I'm genuinely not. But I guess people haven't quite thought about it like that a lot of the time either. So the first thing you said people should do is actually think about whether they actually want this customer as a customer, and start to do some sensible investigations, for want of a better word, into doing that. I know you talk a lot about processes. What sort of processes should people put in place in their business?
So there really should be an onboarding process is the first place. So where you've done you do your due diligence, you then look at collating the information you need to work with that client. You send out your terms and you get contracts signed. So there should be an entire process laid out for all of this, right up until the point of you start delivery, and then after that you've got processes for your invoicing, for your credit control, for reporting and monitoring. So it just all the way through that, what we call the order to cash cycle. There's processes for different elements of it. The high level detail for that will sit in what a credit policy, and then you'll have process flows that sit underneath that, and then procedure manuals for the day to day. This is how you do it. And that's really where a lot of businesses they don't have any of that. So it's usually in somebody's head. For instance, I'm currently working with a client, and I've been doing the series of interviews that I do. And one of the things that happens is that they're able to offer discounts, but everybody is using different criteria on which they would offer a discount. So what that means is that first of all, your customer is not getting a consistent experience, because they could go to one person and be offered a discount of X, go to another and be offered a different discount. But also then there's no control over how much of the profit is being given away in discounts. So having something in a table form that says these are the discounts and these are the reasons, and this is who is authorized to give these discounts, then means that everybody knows exactly what they are allowed to agree to and not allowed to agree to. And to use a trite phrase, but it sits well with me because of being the musician, everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet.
You segued your musicianship into that really rather effortlessly. I quite like that. I know I've told you my story, and I'm sure I shared it on the post. You wrote a post about the same thing a couple of days ago, when in 1988, I worked for Allen and Harris, the estate agents. Head office was in Swindon at the time. I can't remember how many branches we had, but we were told if we wanted to offer anyone a discount, the only person who could approve that was the managing director, the rather legendary Dal Conning at the time, for anyone else who was around at that time. And he was quite a fearsome character, and I'm sure other people would agree with me on that. So that certainly brought consistency in. We didn't tend to offer discounts. When I did a load of work for one of the shoe shop chains, they had the finance director stand on stage and just explain at their annual conference how many pairs of shoes it cost to do certain things in the business. And I think maybe particularly if you've got salespeople who are employed, they might not know how much of the profit that they're eating away at if they're given carte blanche to give discounts to anyone. That's sort of how I've always looked at it. Just really briefly, if you have just joined us, I'm with Nicki Kinton from Confident Cashflow. And if you've got any questions about anything that we're saying, pop them in the comments below and we're asking them. And we'll answer them, sorry. Do you think that's what it is, Nicki, that salespeople sometimes just don't make the sort of mental connection that they're actually giving away a load of the profit if they're giving a discount?
I think that, yes, there is definitely an element of that. People will have heard, no doubt, of the phrase, turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, and then cash is king. So very often, and I don't want to tar all salespeople with the same brush, because there's definitely a group of more enlightened sales people out there, but they're chasing turnover. So they're chasing the sales figure, and they're not concerned then at that point. Once they've made the sale, they're not concerned whether it gets paid for or not. So there's no incentive for them to make sure that the person that they're doing business with can afford it. There's no incentive for them to necessarily check the impact on profit of any activity that they do. I know businesses now that turnover is their main target focus, even if that sale is going to cost them money to make rather than earn them money, which is quite a sort of short-sighted view. Whilst turnover might make them look good on paper, it's not. It's when it doesn't. When it doesn't reflect in the profits or the bank account, then it becomes quite a problem.
Yeah, I think for a long part of my career as a salesperson, I was incentivized on turnover, so it's not difficult to see why people would feel like that. You can always come back with a reason or an excuse why you absolutely had to give that discount to that client to get the sale, and I've heard all of them and probably given all of them over time. So thinking about that then, what can the director or sales director of a business do to get buy-in from the sales team so that they understand that they can't just give discounts whenever they want to?
I think it's all about communication. So one of the things that I talk about with businesses is all about integration, about how this credit policy is integrated across the business. Now, in the sales world, the credit team are often seen as the sales prevention team, which is always quite funny. But the reality is that actually that credit data and the information that the credit team have can really help the sales guys to make more sales, but just to the right people. So those that can afford it, that have got that have got the ability to pay and the willingness to pay, and actually. You can use that data to then give very focused sales campaigns and things like that, so that your sales guys aren't flogging a dead horse all the time. They're actually doing things that are going to almost guarantee them extra income because they're talking with the right people. And I think it's the communication is the big piece. It's about making sure that any decisions that are made, there is clear understanding across the entire business as to why that has to be that way. And so I think it's really important that all the teams engage in regular conversations about what's going on with the business, what's going on with the finances. I think sometimes businesses are too scared to share finance information with their team, and actually there should be more of it, because that helps to be much more transparent, much more there's much more clarity on the decision making and how things affect the company goals.
I think that was the ethos that they were trying to bring in at the retail store that I did some work for, in as much as it was a slightly different subject, but by the finance director saying, if you get the HR director to come down from Bradford to London to have a conversation that the area manager should have had, it's going to cost us, I think it was like 37 pairs of shoes to pay for that trip. So yeah, being open with people. Rachel Gard says that a previous company that she worked for dealt with that in a slightly different way. As a salesperson, we would get money deducted from our commission if the client didn't pay. So it was in our interest to get the client to pay the invoice. That's certainly one way of dealing with it, but I'm guessing you would say, Nicki, that a better solution would be to equip the salesperson so they didn't end up dealing with the wrong customers in the first place. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think so. I think the sales team has a different relationship with the business than the accounts team might do, and so whilst it's really useful to be able to leverage that relationship, then in order to deal with any problems that do occur. I think the whole idea of this is about preventing those problems from happening in the first place. So that the sales team are very much focused on the right type of clients, and that it's not just a one and done, because obviously the circumstances for our clients can change on a dime at the moment. And so it's about ongoing information, and that's why you need that constant dialogue, because as grant money's run out now, we're starting to have to pay back loans. A lot has changed in people's buying patterns as well, so the insolvencies are starting to be more obvious, and as interest rates rise, so that and borrowing becomes harder, then we're going to see more businesses struggling. So we're going to need to have that constant dialogue between the finance and sales, in order to make sure that we're not adding to, if nothing else, adding to one of our customers' financial burden by just giving them more stuff.
And I think on top of that, I mean, Paul McCluskey, hello, Paul has just had the same call with a client. Very well said. I'll put that up on the screen right there. I think the other thing is that just bringing that ethos and that culture of everyone in the business understanding what's going on. It sort of feels like it's almost not very British, that we've not done that in the past, that we've not talked to everyone in the organisation about money. But it sounds as though that would be a really sensible thing to do. So, like you say, everyone's on the hymn sheet. Everyone knows where they stand. I've got a question from Steve Watson, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on Thursday, Steve. Is it reasonable for small businesses to put a 14-day invoice payment date, Nicki?
So every business chooses its own payment terms. What you then need to do, though, is to make sure that they're discussed and agreed with your clients. So whatever you put on your invoice, if you haven't agreed that in advance with your client, then there's no guarantee that they will pay to that, because they've not agreed to it. I think you have to put whatever terms on your invoice is what you really need for your business, and also take into consideration what is the norm for your industry, your sector. So 14 days is definitely not unreasonable, but you can't just decide to do 14 days. You really need to make sure that you talk to your clients about it. Now, if you want to be bullish about it, you could say it's 14 days, or my way or the highway, and you have to be prepared to lose clients over that. Likewise, if a firm then comes to you and says, no, our terms are 30 days end of month, and it's that or nothing else, you then have to decide if you want to continue to do business with them, and if so, how you can then factor that into your cash flow planning.
Yeah, I think with quite a lot of the sort of bigger organisations that I've dealt with, certainly getting your invoice in as a small business on the 29th rather than the 1st. Yes, that's one that I learned quite a long time ago about those terms. Steve, when I speak, my terms are payment upon receipt of invoice and payment upon booking, so that we get paid once it goes in the diary. I'm not keeping my time in a diary for when I haven't been paid. But I guess I am a tiny bit bullish, to use Nicki's word, but I do get that out of the way in one of the very early emails when we're talking about how much I charge. When someone asks me how much I charge, I tell them what the terms of that will be as well, because I don't want to give them just a number and then presume that they can pay me a couple of months after I've spoken. Getting some questions. Keep the questions coming, folks. I'm sure Nicki would love to answer them. And Paul McCluskey, the wonderful Paul, asks, is it worth the sales team having KPIs around cash collection, billing on time? Would this align thinking?
Good question, Paul. Certainly the business should have KPIs around cash collection and billing on time, most definitely. And I think that the sales team have a part to play in making, meeting those KPIs. But again, it's a collaborative approach, I think. It's not just about it being one team's responsibility. That's the big thing for me. Yes, you will have people whose job it is to do credit control, to do the credit, to do the credit checks, to do all of that sort of pre-sale due diligence and post-sale management of any credit that's offered. But I think the sales team can certainly support that and activity. And because they're constantly having, if this is an ongoing client relationship, they'll be constantly having conversations. So it's something that should be involved in all of those conversations that they have.
And I would never accuse Neil Giller of being bullish, but Neil, I'm guessing you know Neil as well. Neil says your payment terms are your payment terms, equals thumbs up, thumbs up. Someone else's budget does not determine your value. Thank you for that, Neil. I'm thrilled and flattered you're watching this afternoon. Thank you.
Neil's quite right, though. Neil is absolutely spot on. But saying no to people is something we're very, we struggle with.
Yeah. I think increasingly struggle less with age and experience, but I get it when you're a new business as well. So we've talked about the processes people should put in place. We've talked about how people should start. We've answered some of people's questions, and if you've got questions, put them in the comments below and we'll answer them. How can people work with you, Nicki? How do you work with people to help them make sure that they've got all of this in place?
So there's two different levels that I work at, I suppose. So the primary one is that I work with a business that might be suffering with a little bit of late payments, or they've had some a period of growth, and they realise that actually they don't have the control and the processes to support that, so they need to get something in place. And I go in and I do an audit, a deep dive on everything they're doing in that order to cash cycle, and I look at who's doing it, how they're doing it, any documentation involved, things like the terms, and I do a big review of that and provide then a report for them of all the areas where there is scope for improvement. I also highlight things that are working really well for them, and then we'd sit down and we talk about putting that into some form of process improvement project, whereby we work together over a period of months to implement changes, and then I'll stay with the business for a little while afterwards to make sure that the implementation goes well, and we can do any tweaks further down the line if things don't particularly work. Now that works really well for the slightly bigger business, that has several employees. Might be turning over somewhere, 7-figure plus, that sort of turnover. But for the smaller, the micro businesses, I do a very, very condensed version of that, a bit of a brainstorming session, if you like, with a power hour, where we would talk through the problems they're facing, and I would ask them questions about what they're currently doing, and we would brainstorm ideas of things that they can change, small, easy changes that they can make a difference as to what comes out the other end.
That leads on pretty well, because you've just mentioned terms, and Nick Mathias has stated the issue with a KPI and cash collection is also whether the employee fully understands their own company's terms and conditions, and many employees in many sectors don't actually know their own terms. I'd be interested in your comment on that, Nicki.
It's very true, actually. So it depends on the size of the organisation, but what happens as well is if you are doing business with somebody, a buyer, you will discuss the terms with the buyer, but they might have an accounts department, and they won't know that the buyer has agreed to your terms, and the accounts department will automatically apply what they think is their standard. So unless they're notified that something is different to what their standard is that has been agreed, then they will work on that basis. But also within an organisation, when you're talking about your own terms and conditions, if somebody in the business has developed these, and they might be on the company's website, if you're doing e-commerce or anything, you've got that document out. It might not be you as the person doing the credit control that has sent those terms out. And you may never see them, and it should be part of somebody's induction. If part of their job is to be doing the chasing or even invoicing, anything like that, they should, as part of their whole onboarding and induction process, should be given a clear set of the company's standard terms, and have the opportunity to go through them and ask any questions, so that when they are faced with any questions, that they know. And I think the same should be in customer service roles as well, because customer service roles, they're very often being asked things about elements that would be included in the terms. So things like returns or guarantees or anything like that. All of that stuff is in the terms, but they're not widely shared in a business.
Richard Shears, I beg your pardon, Richard, says, great interview with some helpful practical tips on credit management. Thank you, Richard. Weird thing about LinkedIn settings, some people appear on our system as private user, but Richard, thank you very much for that. For anyone who's watching who isn't already connected with Nicki, let's just pop that back up on screen for a second. That's where you will find Nicki Kinton on LinkedIn, and if you haven't connected with her already, then go and do so. And if you've got any more questions for us this afternoon, ask away as well. Pop them in the comments, and we will answer them as we go on. So that's how people can work with you. If someone is just starting a business and needs to put the absolute first steps in place, picking up on some of the things that people have said here about how many days should they allow people to pay and that sort of thing, what's the ultimate fundamentals, the ultimate foundation that people should get in place before they even start selling and invoicing people?
So they should have an idea of what their competitors are doing for a start, so that they can be very clear about how they are going to differentiate themselves. If they're not differentiating on price, what else are they offering? So it could well be that their terms are slightly different, or it could be that they're going to be I suppose onboarding in a different way. There's going to be something that they're going to do that's going to make them stand, because they want to attract people that might be going to somebody more experienced, or a longer standing business, that sort of thing. But and the things that they really should have would be, I would say, a customer information form, whether that's a credit application form or just to gather all the information, so that they collect the same information for every customer every time. I've seen it before now, where people have been selling to somebody and they've been contacted through some messenger app of some description, like Facebook Messenger or something like that, and then when it's come time to pay, they've been ghosted, because they didn't take any other details. So they don't have a postal address or an email address or anything. It's all been done through that messenger app, whatever they've done, and so then it comes to payment, and they don't really know. They don't have any other means of getting in touch, or if you want to go down a legal route, you've got to have other information, correct business name, correct address, all those sort of things. I had one situation where somebody was struggling to get a debt in, and they couldn't take it to the small claim. It was thrown out of small claims because they had the business name slightly wrong. And I look at so many people's zero accounts and things like that, where they've only got half the business name in the title. So when it goes out on an invoice, it's only having half the business name. So it's fundamentals like making sure that you've got the full name in it. And there is a difference. You can't for instance, for limited companies, for instance, you can't automatically say LTD, because if it's written out in full on company's house, that's the legal name you've got to try. You need to have on your invoicing. So if you then have to take it any further, you have got the full legal name. So that customer information form, whether you complete it yourself or get the customer to do it for you, is a key thing. And then a standard set of terms and conditions. It's the one thing that a lot of businesses don't do straight away, because they think that they won't have any problems. I'm only going to do business with people I trust. I'm only going to do business with people I like. And actually, I always say to people about now, what's it? Is it Frank? I can never pronounce the surname, but catch me if you can, Guy.
I don't know. I can look it up on the other screen. Go on.
But essentially, the first person he ever defrauded was his father. So this whole idea of only working with people you trust is a bit of a a red herring, really. And terms and conditions are a bit like an insurance policy. You begrudge paying for it until you really need it. And I think, but more than anything else, rather than them being a stick to beat your clients up with when it goes wrong, what they are is a tool to help you lay out very clear expectations, and so your customer also knows exactly what they can expect from you. So, and I think that sets the tone of the relationship. That starts it on a professional footing, and I think those are the two areas. I think that when you're starting out, those are the things that you really need to be thinking about.
Certainly in estate agency, which I did for 20 years, when I worked for the very wonderful Nigel Dixon in Witney, we used to sit and go through word for word the terms of business with the client, explaining to them what that meant, each phrase, each sentence, each paragraph, so that the client had the opportunity in a friendly way to ask any questions about it, and if absolutely necessary for us to make any amendments to it, or maybe offer a different sort of contract, a different terms of business. The estate agency has several different ways of doing business, but we would explain that to the client, and the fact that we knew that we did that every single time was really quite useful to us on the couple of occasions when people didn't want to pay. And the second point which I would make, which I it's not a warning to anyone, but the very first person to let me down on an invoice when I was running that magazine was the chair of one of the networking organisations that I was a member of. So the trust is one thing, but putting actual factual information in place was something that I wish that I had done a long time ago, because I was way down a list of creditors that were ever going to get paid, and I never did. And it was someone who I sort of believed that I trusted from the outset. If anyone else has got any questions for Nicki, pop them in the comments below. We're going to talk for another 4 or 5 minutes before I let Nicki go for the afternoon, because she's given so much advice. Where would you like people to find you, Nicki? Where's the best place that people can go to find out about you, to find out about your services, to engage with you? Where would you like people to look?
Well, so you can either look on my LinkedIn profile, or you can go to my website, which is just confidentcashflow.com. But either of those are the best places to find me. But I hang out on LinkedIn quite a bit.
I think confidentcashflow.com is mentioned at the top of the... I'm just moving the screens around so I can see it. It's mentioned at the top just next to Nicki's photo on her LinkedIn profile. So Confident Cashflow. You put... I mean, one of the examples that you've talked about this afternoon, you've also written about on LinkedIn. You do put a ton of helpful advice out there on your LinkedIn profile as well.
I do try, and I do write blogs as well. If you head over to my to the website, there's a whole section of blogs as well, and I keep meaning to put some of those out as LinkedIn articles as well, but I haven't got around to doing all of that. So there's plenty of information there for anybody who wants to just grab a quick read. And if there isn't a blog on a topic that you're interested in, let me know, because I would love to be able to sort of expand that library for you. So
I've literally just had someone ask me this afternoon about something in networking that I've never written about, and he was sort of apologetic, but people don't realise the favour that they're doing to business owners like us who have to think up content every day. He really did me a favour, because I didn't know that was a question that people were asking. So you don't know what people don't know about this stuff, I guess. And what I do find is, in all of the content that you put out there, you somehow managed to take a subject that I would consider to be quite dry, because it's not the side of the business that excites me, but you do really make it come alive. You do really make it understandable as well for the sort of lay folk amongst us who aren't as into the process as you. But you lived this, as well as outside of being Confident Cash Flow, you're also quite a prolific musician as well.
Yes,
I
yeah,
promised I would talk about. Oh,
no,
no, I
no.
threatened I would talk about it. I think is a better way to.
Yeah, I love my music. It's my go-to outlet. It's my it de-stresses me. It takes me to a happy place. It's just amazing. It's been brilliant as well. I've got some really really solid friendships through my music, and I've had the fortune, good fortune to play in some amazing places as well. So
There is in our interests. There is a networking side to that people often don't spot. As well as you say, you've made some great friendships, and I'm sure you find that network takes you away from the business side of things and helps de-stress you. As you say, I think that's one of the benefits of other types of networking that don't often or doesn't often get talked about, really. The fact that I've got the whole you play, I'm not as talented as you, I only go to gigs, but I find that hugely distresses me, going and de-stresses me, not distresses me, going and listening to other people who are really good at playing. I'm going to thank you for your time, Nicki. Thank you ever so much for spending so much time with us this afternoon. If anyone's got any further questions, if you're watching this on replay and you've got some questions, I will tag Nicki in this post in a second. So put your questions in the comments. Nicki will definitely see them. Go and connect with Nicki on LinkedIn as well. That would be really worth your while. Thank you, Nicki, for this afternoon. Thank you for talking to us. I've loved your analogies and the stuff that you've had to say.
thank you, Stefan. It's been lovely, absolutely lovely. My first ever LinkedIn Live.
Oh, right. I really like that because I've been a couple of other people's first ever LinkedIn Live as well. I'm going to press the button which stops us and say goodbye to everyone. Nicki, just so that you know, we have 20 or 30 seconds before it actually takes us off screen. In the words of the great Davina McCall, you are live. Please do not swear.